Hello, this is Bespoke Unit, I'm CP, and in this video we'll be reviewing a cult classic, an absolute favourite among the cigar community, the Man O' War Armada by Aj Fernandez. So the good news is I didn't burn my tie this time, so I guess I'm in luck. So firstly, like every review, we're going to be using the Bespoke Unit cigar formula. This is a quantifiable review matrix, and you can view a finished PDF in the description below, and you can compare it while I talk. You can also download a blank copy if you just go to the link, and there's another link down in the description. You can download one yourself, so you can use it for your reviews as well. This is the Man O' War from Armada, which is a brand produced by Aj Fernandez in his, I believe his factory is in Ocotal in Nicaragua. It is a cult classic. It is well known among the cigar community. It is available in a variety of vitolas. This one is I think it's called the War Horse. It's perfecto, 6.5 by 64. It's a big one, and it offers potentially a medium full experience, but we'll go into that in further detail in a minute. The smoking time, I have it at around 90 minutes. I have had several of these. Some were longer, some were at very least 90 minutes. Other reviewers I read around before, I'm not stealing their notes, but you know, I want to know what people are saying. They were saying it was around 2 hours or more. I didn't experience that with this, even though it's a very big cigar. It is a slow smoker though, I'll give it that. The method of making it, well, it's hecho mano, it's made from long leaf. It is made with an Ecuadorian Samutra Maduro, which is a very low yield crop. Only 10,000 of these cigars are made a year, and that partly explains its high price tag of around $20. The binder, all I have here is that it's from Nicaragua. Filler, the same thing. I did a little digging and I managed to find that it's mostly Ligero from Esteli and Ometepe. So it should make for an interesting blend indeed. In terms of look and feel, well, unfortunately I don't have an unlit version anymore. I only had 2 of these. Paul gave me them in a stash so I could review them, and I'd been holding on to them for a couple of years in my humidor. In fact, I've been using this Boveda acrylic humidor for the most part. I have also a small Boveda acrylic humidor that I keep out of the light. This one is most of the time covered up, but for these videos I'll uncover it to show it off. It was kept at 69% RH using the Boveda packs, and I monitored it regularly using a Boveda Butler. So I made sure it was properly acclimated, and it had been aged for a while before I tried it. Like I said, it's been floating around in there for about 2 years. In terms of look and feel then. So before I lit this, and you'll see in the written review when it's published, it is a very sleek cigar. It has a very even construction, quite a nice firmness, nice resistance. The spring here isn't too soft and it's not too hard either. In terms of the oily sheen, so it's very oily, it's got a nice reflection to it, it catches the light very nicely. There are no really thick visible veins. In fact, the wrapper is very cleanly rolled. You can barely see the seams of the leaf going around there. In terms of aromas, so I had mostly at first ammonia when I took it out of the cellophane, a bit knocked back, but I got in there and I got some dark, thick leather and a bit of Ceylon tea, actually, Ceylon tea, excuse me. For the Prelight, so the draw was ideal, it was perfect, a nice slight resistance, the way I personally like it, and it was full of flavour. In terms of aromas, I was getting a little bit of raisins, kind of a booziness in there, some varnished oak, so you can see a vintage oak furniture. You can just imagine it with that beeswax, that kind of aroma there, and a distinctive nutmeg aroma as well. There was a little bit of spiciness there too. Before we talk about the palate, let's talk about the burn. Now this is, as I said, the second one I've smoked, and I admit the first one I was a little bit disappointed, and maybe I just didn't give it the time that it deserved, but I was still taking it seriously for the purposes of this review. In terms of draw, it's perfect, just like the Prelight. Nice little bit of resistance. At first there was not much of a smoke output when it was first lit, but that's because it does have a perfecto shape. As I was getting in, smoke output improved significantly. In terms of burn, quite wavy. As you can see, I'm having a couple of issues that I'm going to have to correct here. In terms of temperature, very cool smoke indeed. The backbone, I was a little bit disappointed because at first I was getting about 1/4 of an inch to 1/3 of an inch of ash, and it was hanging on quite well, and then suddenly, without any warning, I'm usually quite good at anticipating this, just plopped in my lap. unceremoniously, made an absolute mess. Same thing with the first one. This is a tough one. I don't want to be influenced by the cult following, and I was very excited to try this. I'm a big fan of Aj Fernandez's creations. One of my favourite cigars is actually the Monty that he did for Monte Cristo a while ago, and I still have a couple of those old box press ones with the band that covers the whole cigar. I love those. So when I heard about this, I was really, really excited. But then the first one I tried, I was a little bit disappointed. I found that it was a bit flat in flavour. It was just a power bomb. And the second one, I'm not getting that same power. It's a medium to full. It's not overwhelming whatsoever, but the flavours, they're quite hard to detect. So in the first third, I had mostly Brazil nut, very distinctive Brazil nut flavour in there, followed by rosemary. Now I know aromatics, some purists would argue that you can't have aromatic flavours in a cigar, but here for me this was a burnt aromatic. You know, you get some rosemary leaves, you set them alight or use them for cooking, they start to become a little char grilled. It was that. And then some white pepper in the retrohale. As for the second third, I was experiencing some dark cocoa and some clay earth. So here where I live, the earth is very argileux, you'd say. It's very thick in clay. When it's dry, it's solid as a rock. When it's wet, it has a very strong, very thick quality. So it had these kind of minerally earthy flavours that I'd relate to that, as well as toasted oak. So oak wood that hasn't yet been fully set alight. It's just starting to get wisp with the flames, and it's starting to just turn a little bit dark brown. With regards to the final third, so the oak, the toasted oak had really extended here into charred oak. Flavours became thick and dark and heavy and bold, but again, not overwhelming. This remained a medium-bodied cigar. In parallel to that, I had old leather. So old leather, I talked about vintage leather in terms of the colour. I've talked about leather in terms of the aromas, but here vintage leather, like this chair, really old leather that's been around, that's been sat in a lot, and has got this, it has been slightly polished up over the years as well to give it a nice healthy sheen, which reminds me I need to polish this chair. It's taken a beating of late. And black pepper was the final note, certainly in the retrohale. It was quite distinctive. So those were the tasting notes of each third, and here are my observations of the experience as a whole. So in terms of a complexity, I would like to argue that it was quite intricate. It was a complex smoking experience, which probably explains why I struggled to identify those various aromas. There was a lot happening, and maybe I just had difficulty pinning them, singling them out and really isolating them and being able to describe them. In terms of mouthfeel, it's quite smooth, a little bit toothy there, leaves an oiliness on the palate, a little film that is quite distinctive. The astringence, so the dryness, I found it to be relatively tart. It needs a good drink to accompany it, otherwise you might get a little bit thirsty doing that. And similarly, the palate stimulation, the whole stimulation, which is when you hold the smoke in your mouth and you feel the way it presses and stimulates different parts of the tongue. I found that it was quite focused towards the front, certainly at first, and slightly on the lateral front, and then towards the final third, it did start to reach to the back of the tongue, but not as much as I felt that it should. And then in the life cycle, so this wasn't as developed as I hoped. I hoped it to be much more complex in the evolution rather than the notes in general. It wasn't linear by any stretch of the imagination. It wasn't linear at all. It still did have something to say each time, but I just didn't feel that it was really trying to tell me something new throughout it. And then with the finish, it wasn't a short finish, but it wasn't overly long, quite somewhere in the middle. It did leave flavour in the mouth, but they didn't last very long. And finally, the residual scent, which is the smell that is left in the room, something I always like to touch on, is that I expected this to be, it's quite a bold cigar with leather flavours. I expected it to smell quite strong and relatively unpleasant. Wasn't the case at all. I was pleasantly surprised. It left a nice little odour while I wrote up my notes, and I did let it linger for a bit without opening a window, and quite enjoyed it. So next is the experience. the experience of the cigar as a whole, which talks about its presentation, its value, and the occasions it can be smoked. Well, first of all, it'd be hard to ignore this band, which is reminiscent of 300, you know. This is Sparta! I want to like it. I think it's cool. It's got a nice bit of bling to it. But I admit that I do have a thing for more understated, smaller, classier, if you don't mind my saying so, bands. I prefer them to have a little bit more nuance to them. Nevertheless, it is very stylish. It has a nice embossing all the way around. It seems to be cleanly glued on as well, and the black and gold has a nice finish to it. As for the box, I didn't see the box. I only had 2 of these, so I'm afraid I can't comment on that. I did have a look at a couple of photos. Couldn't really say whether they were particularly interesting or not. So unfortunately, I can't go get in any further detail on that. In terms of occasion, so this is a cigar. It's a very mighty cigar that you probably want to take out at special occasions. But I would refrain from using them at formal occasions. I'd probably use them, you know, a good moment among friends, say it's a friend you haven't seen in a while, or a relative, or buddies around a barbecue. You really want to treat yourselves, this would probably be a good choice. But if you're going to a club or wedding, do you really want to take a cigar out with a massive Spartan helmet on it? And I suppose it depends on the environment, but I'd be a little bit reluctant to be perfectly honest. But that's just my opinion. And in terms of value, so there's a lot is said about the $20 price point, and this was, I believe, as part of a sampler pack, and it would have been $15 each. It's hard to say. I try and review things regardless of their price, and it's hard not to be mindful that this is a $20 stick, which is quite steep given the market that it is targeting. Nevertheless, it is important to bear in mind that the Ecuadorian Samutra Maduro wrapper is very labor intensive to produce, very low yield, and the premium fillers that have been used in this are quite pricey too. So it does justify a higher price point. I get it. But would I spend $20 on a stick like this again? Probably not, to be honest. Sorry. Now finally, pairings. Now this is a concision that is not given any marks on the Bespoke unit cigar formula. This is just something that we like to bear in mind. If you're looking to get the cigar and you want to think about the kind of experience, how to pair it, the different types of accords you could produce, we always like to cover that. So firstly, in terms of food, I'd say this would go really well with a wood fire barbecue. And I did mention earlier in occasions that it would be a great option to treat yourself during a barbecue with some close friends. Perfect. If you like cooking over wood, this is a great option. You really do get those woody flavors, and in the meat that are grilled and crispy on the outside, but nice and red on the inside, this would be a wonderful accord. Dark chocolate would be an interesting choice as well, and I actually thought specifically of this. This is Argentco. This is a chocolate that Paul and I discovered in Granada in Nicaragua. They have a variety of these really nice artisanal chocolates, and the one that stuck into my mind that I thought would be a good pairing with this was the batch number 18, which is a limited edition. I believe that they still do it. That has very rich, bright and vibrant chocolate flavors, but it's 80% cacao, and it's made with, and the other 10% is made with cocoa butter. So you do still retain, it's not milky, it's very, very rich in flavor. And that would go quite well with the cigar, and it probably enhance the experience. Finally, if you're looking for snacks to go with the cigar, I would recommend actually Brazil nuts. They were in the first third, it was a very distinctive aroma there, and it would certainly be interesting to extend that by actually pairing them with the nuts themselves. And of course, beverages. So this is an important factor. Naturally, we often enjoy our cigar with a drink, and I would highly recommend it for this because it's a little bit dry. Bourbon whiskey was at the top of my list, especially a nice dark aged bourbon whiskey. I thought that Woodford Reserve would be a good choice, or potentially Buffalo Trace. Otherwise, if you're looking for a non-alcoholic alternative, root beer would be a good one. Nice artisanal root beer with that vanilla-y essence and a little bit of herbaceousness would go quite nicely with this. And finally, an espresso coffee. I wouldn't go for a latte with this, no milk, you just want the full, bold espresso. Something like a twin engine from Nicaragua would be great. That would really build up the flavors and maybe add some complexity and nuance to the cigar as well. So to wrap this up, this cigar on the cigar formula got 77 out of 100, so 77%. That's a good 4-star rating, so it is a very good cigar indeed. 77 sounds low, I get it. A lot of publications use very high numbers most of the time, even if it's for a not very good cigar. We try and use the full scale of 100 points, which is why then we apply a star system afterwards, so that it, at least psychologically, you get what is the equivalent to. 77%, that is very good. I'd be very happy if I got that in an exam, so there you go. As for my closing thoughts, was I really disappointed by the cigar? No, I wasn't disappointed. I did enjoy it for what it is. I feel that it's a shame though that I felt I let myself be a victim to the hype and I expected something that it was more. Once I had the second one, I began to understand a little bit more, I began to appreciate it a lot more. I think this is a very good cigar that is definitely worth trying, at least so you can understand the buzz and then make your own opinion. Would I go out and get one myself? Probably not, although maybe in a couple of years' time I'd be very curious to give it another try, so who knows. Otherwise, this is a very enjoyable cigar, a long cigar that you can have for a contemplative moment at home or with some close friends to cherish together and remember it by. That's all from me today. I'm CP and this is Bespoke Unit. If you're looking for any more lifestyle guides or resources of that sort, we cover cigars, alcoholic spirits, personal grooming, suits and style in general. Just head to bespokeunit.com or explore around our channel. Until then, take care.